Hey, John. So we recently talked about goal setting for the year. Really exciting this time of year. A lot of optimism. I'd love to talk a little bit about how do we evaluate ourselves throughout the year? How do we check in? How do we keep tabs on whether or not we're on track to our goals? And then what do we do if we're not on track? So, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you and how you guys do things to, keep track of your goals and make sure that you're hitting them as you go?
Yeah, this subject's interesting to me because sales drive the business. Like without a sale, there really is no business, and so we try to take this stuff pretty seriously. We're watching it on a high frequency. We're evaluating our reps' performance, behavior. We're we're looking at outside factors. We're always trying to tweak and evaluate what's going on, and so I think it's really such a relevant conversation what we had about goal setting because it ties right back into that, helps us achieve our goals. And, as you and I have talked about before, we hit our goals. That's what
Mhm.
we do. And so we're going to do everything we can in order to do that. So, um, yeah, you've talked a little bit about kind of your timeline with me before, but maybe for people listening, if you want to just go over how you do things at Textbook Painting to make sure you guys are on track.
Sure. Yeah, and then I want to circle back. You mentioned like high frequency, so I want to dive
Mhm.
into that. What specifically you mean by that? But yeah, happy to chat about a little bit of how we look at things. Specifically on the sales side. So we have weekly sales meetings where we're going to meet with the reps as a team. So this is like a group meeting where we're looking at not. So we will look at individual rep performance here, but we're really focused on like the company wide performance. Where are we at as a team to the company sales goal that we hit? We do either weekly or bi-weekly one-on-one meetings with the each sales rep, where we're really diving into their individual performance. So slightly different there. And then I would say like looking at the weekly numbers is important. We're looking at the last week, how did we do? And we're looking ahead to the next week to kind of predict like how many quotes are we expecting to get an answer on? What are we expecting to get closure on, hopefully win in the next week? As well as, what new appointments do we have scheduled for the week? How's the estimate calendar looking? How full are we? Things like that. Um, Try not to make dramatic changes to like things on a weekly basis, meaning if we, maybe have a bad week, I wouldn't say like want to go into the next week thinking, hey, let's make some dramatic changes. Um, but when it comes to the months, to the point you mentioned a minute ago, we don't want to miss those goals. We hit our monthly goals. It's okay. I think the weeks are kind of like waypoints, check-ins a little bit. Are we on pace? And if we're not, then we can just make some small corrections and get back on track. If we're not hitting monthly goals, that's a problem. That's where we're gonna, maybe get into. But some of the more like detailed coaching, perhaps eventually performance improvement plans with individual reps and different things like that.
Cool. So the data that you're talking about, like what are you actually um, like weekly talking about, and then what are you monitoring monthly? Like what are those key metrics you're looking at?
So we look at some marketing stuff. I know that's part of, certainly part of any sales conversation is how many leads do we have and things. I'm going to set that aside because I kind of think of that from like a more of a marketing meeting rather than a sales meeting. And I think we're really just focused on the sales part here. Um, so we're going to look at how many, what percentage, how many estimates did we do? How many estimates do we have scheduled, right? Back and forward of the estimates that we did, where do they stand? Are they, still open or pending? Are they closed won, closed lost? Um, Things like that. How much did we sell? Um, we're going to look at average job size. I'm trying to think about some of the other stuff that we look at. I think that's the main stuff. Is there something that you
I
guys
mean,
think of that I'm missing?
we just did this recently
Well,
with the team, and I think you know we're pulling we're pulling stats from PaintScout
mm-hmm.
and looking. at those stats, I mean, those are pretty important. We're going typically, we're looking at the last in on a weekly basis. We're looking at trailing 60 days. Like, how's
Yep.
your performance really going? And so we're looking at win rate. Obviously, win rate win rate's huge. It really indicates whether a rep is having success. We're looking at dollars closed as well.
Hmm.
So, like, we want to see close to a 50-50 on those. 50% win rate, 50% dollar closed. Sometimes dollars closed is a little bit less depending on the size of jobs you're bidding. But we're looking at those numbers to make sure they're tracking properly. I think 60 days is a good enough window to see what performance is really like.
Hmm.
And we're trying to make that coaching that you're talking about, which we're going to get into, relevant to their situation.
Hmm.
And yeah, so we do like a weekly sales meeting as well. We've got our goal sheet up, and we also have the results on a separate column from that goal of
Hmm.
how you're actually performing. And yeah, we're watching that thing like crazy because our company, as like yours, is all employees, so we care deeply about
Sure.
keeping our team employed and hitting those goals. And sales drives everything. So yeah.
The that meeting is basically, you know, who's in that meeting? Let's start, maybe just answer. I have a good idea, but
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the reps themselves. We include our marketing manager in that meeting
mm,
and our whoever's managing the sales team.
yep.
So, um,
And
and then
yourself?
I've been opting out of that. So,
Okay.
sales manager's been looking after that. But um, yeah, then they have an agenda. Like, they kind of go over the activity that they've been doing, their results, talk about process, dig into
Hmm.
some jobs they're having a hard time with, that kind of thing. But we're doing that weekly. So yeah,
When do you guys do that meeting? Is that Mondays or Fridays, or what does that look like?
we do it Wednesday afternoons.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
Okay. Got it.
kind of
Why
close the deal.
Wednesdays? That wasn't. I wouldn't have thought that.
Oh man,
No reason.
it's been. I mean, kind of random. It's just when it works for
Okay.
everybody. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no
Fair enough.
no rhyme or reason. When do you
Yeah.
when do you run yours?
Typically Monday mornings.
Monday mornings. Okay.
Yeah, and I think we've tried different things, and I don't know that there's a perfect answer. And I think the idea behind it is like, we can get our data from the last week.
Hmm.
So it's not usually like first thing, but it's pretty early on Monday morning, and then we still have got the whole week ahead. It just seems like it's kind of like a natural, how did we do last week? What's going on this week? But I don't know. I've debated often doing it maybe on a Friday. I think sometimes like sales reps might be kind of downshifting on Fridays anyway, so it might be a good day for
Hmm.
meetings.
But
Yeah,
Michael,
I don't
nobody does anything on Fridays, anyways. Right? I had a rep tell me that one time. He's like, no one does anything on Mondays, and no one does anything on Fridays,
know.
and nobody really works before 11, and no one really works
Hmm,
after 2. Everyone's just kind of
interesting.
getting going and shutting down. And I was like, so you have like what is that, 6 hours a week to sell?
Is this a
So
younger person by any chance?
unfortunately not.
Oh,
Unfortunately not.
interesting. Okay.
Um, cool. Yeah. So you're running the meetings, getting the data. Once you've gotten to a situation where things aren't going as well as you hoped, what happens? How do you identify it?
So first thing that we do is I get out the Nerf gun and we start shooting everybody. No. All right. So the goals, we do have the Nerf gun handy. That's in case of emergency.
That might be
So,
considered abuse. So you better be
well,
careful.
yeah. Don't tell anybody. All right. So what do we do when we're not hitting goals, or maybe we're not on track to hit the goals? So I think it depends on, is this, a pattern of behavior?
Mhm.
Is this a one-off? Is this are we trending in the wrong direction, or is this maybe just a blip? I would say the big thing I want to look at is I'm gonna have a conversation with the rep. I'm gonna speak to like the individual here. I want to drill down. So when I say we're not hitting our goals, I want to drill down. I think that's the first thing that I want to know
Mhm.
is what part of our goal are we not, like, where's the actual problem? I think the actual like dollar sold is the end result of activities and math, I guess, like we talked about last episode of how many estimates are we doing? What's the average job size? What percentage of those are we winning? We can use that math equation, and that's going to tell us how much we are selling. And we set specific goals and targets for each of those so that we have a benchmark to, kind of go back to and say, okay, our total sales are less than what they were supposed to be for the month of January, let's just say. Okay, well, that's not good. Let's figure out why. Is it because we didn't do enough estimates? Is it because we didn't win enough or win a high enough percentage of the jobs? Or is it because, no, we did enough estimates and we won as many jobs as we were supposed to, but they're all small. And so they just didn't add up to the right number there. Whatever it might be is going to determine what we do next.
So let me ask you this. I mean, we talked about this last episode too, about when we're doing goal setting.
Mm-hmm.
What are your numbers? Like what percentages? Like, I know we talked about that, but maybe just to recap, when you're in these meetings and you're seeing what you consider to be poor performance, what is that? What do you consider poor performance?
So I would say, like, on an individual rep basis, we're looking at about 10 to 15 estimates a week, depending on seasonality and time of year. We're looking for a 40 to 45% win rate,
Like at minimum.
depending on time of year, as well as like the experience of the rep. A brand new rep, we set the baseline a little bit lower than that, just to be clear, but that's just for like their first couple months. And an average job size is, that one's, generally doesn't change as dramatically throughout the year. It certainly, it might for other companies, but for us, we see that it doesn't too much. So we find that exterior projects typically have a higher job size. So that tends to give us a bump up in that time of year.
So what are you seeing like average job size mean right now?
Yeah, for us, it's usually in the like 5,000 to 5,500 range.
Yeah,
that's what we find.
Funny enough, I mean that is very close to the standard of PaintScout users, that $5,000 mark. And it's funny, inflation hasn't changed as much as I thought it would have. So hoping to see some changes there. Everybody can start raising their prices, right?
I think
That's
so.
the goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think unfortunately, I feel like, and again, I don't want to get us onto a different topic, but I feel like in the painting industry, we operate with such a scarcity mindset too often, that we are often like too slow in raising our prices. I know, like, for us, we got, the fun call from our Sherwin-Williams rep, whatever, recently, to say, hey, by the way, you're getting a price increase in, I don't know, January or February or whenever it is. And, I think most of us in the industry had that happen in the last month or two here. And it's like, okay, at that same time, it's the winter, it's a slower time of year where maybe we're discounting, but to raise prices this time of year seems like crazy. I'm already having a hard time selling. If I raise my prices, it's going to be even harder. And I would just put a opinion on that. I disagree. I think there's never a bad time to raise the prices. You need to raise your prices when you need to raise your prices. Often the beginning of the year is a time when, our vendors are charging us more, like Sherwin-Williams, or you're giving out employee raises, pretty common. And so this is a really good time of year to reflect on that and, raise your rates. And I think for most painting contractors could raise their prices by 10 or 15% and not see significant decline in how many jobs they actually sell.
Yeah, totally agree on that. And maybe that's a topic for another time. I think
for sure
we say raise your price, but how do you raise your price?
Sure.
Like, actually, what does it mean? So we'll get into that another time. But we talked a little bit about digging into the process. You've identified the data. And by the way, ours is very similar in what data we look for. You found somebody that isn't achieving, and you've identified that. Let's call it midway through the month. What is your first step with that person?
I think, the first thing is we're going to have just that part of that one-on-one conversation, and just ask them like, hey, what's going on? Notice that, whatever, we're not on track here. Tell me, how do you feel like things are going? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? And I just want to hear from them. They might be like, hey, I was really sick the last week, just wasn't on my A game, feeling much better, confident, gonna have a great week. It's like, okay, sounds good. Gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, and kind of see where, check in after the next week or something, and see that actually took place. Or they might say that, so I would say, like, the big thing I'm looking for is what I call, like, avoiding a blame shift. I don't want somebody to externalize. So what I mean by that is I don't want them to say, oh, nobody wants to buy, or, our prices are just too high, or the economy, or the politicians, or the weather, or whatever.
Yeah.
Of, just BS that we don't have any control over. And I'm a big believer in, like, the psychology behind that, which is when the problem is caused by something outside of my control, my brain does not need to spend time fixing it. I cannot fix the economy. So I'm good to the economy. Nothing I can do. I'm not going to make any changes. That sucks. And that is a loser mentality. And so if I hear that from a sales rep who's struggling, I'm going to call it out immediately. If it's a newer rep, we're going to have a nice little teaching moment on that concept. And if it's something that, we've talked about a lot, eventually we're going to have conversations about them not being a core values fit. But so it kind of depends on how often we've been doing that. But I'm really looking for is them telling me what are the behaviors, what are the actions that they're taking to get back on track.
So what's the right answer? Like,
I think I like it when they know their own numbers, when they can say, yeah, my sales success rate's really down here. But what I've noticed is when I haven't been doing a really good job with my follow-up calls, and kind of haven't been as good with the CRM, and just kind of setting activities for the next time I'm going to call customers. So I've already gone in, I've set up next steps with all of the quotes I did last week, and I'm already kind of back on track here. Those types of, like, self-coaching and self-correcting are, I would say next level. It's certainly, not necessarily like a newer rep maybe is going to be at that level yet. But I think that's things along those lines are to me, the ideal answer.
I would also say too, I mean, we've talked so much here about reps and coaching reps. And I think that's really important. I mean, like, this is the area that we operate in. But I would say if you're listening and you run your own business and you do the sales, these things are all tangible to you as well. It's going to take more, self-evaluation, but that winner mindset that you're talking about, figuring out the plan forward when things are going wrong. These things really apply so much to sales. Sales can be really emotional. It's hard to take the nose, hard to, say, so what? That doesn't matter that much. And so always looking to the future is just so important. So if you're listening today and you're in that position, that, hopefully is helpful as well. If you're looking to add a rep, I mean, these are things that you'll have to be willing to coach on, I think, which I think when I first got into this, I didn't quite realize how much coaching I had to do for adults to stay positive and have a plan. And I thought people could figure this out for themselves, but a lot of times, I mean, I even need help. We all need help. So
yeah, sure.
So anyways, with that said, I mean, so you have a rep, you're coaching them, you have a process, right? Like at Textbook, you guys have a process, and we do too. I mean, we've developed sales process. So maybe for those who don't have a sales process, do you want to just kind of do a quick, 10,000 foot view here of what that looks like, and then we'll kind of dig into how to evaluate it.
I mean, I think so. It's hard to really. I mean, again, it's I guess like a really brief overview of like a sales process might look something like sales rep calls the homeowner beforehand, day or two before or day of or something, confirm the appointment, introduce themselves. When they get to the home, you know, how do they introduce themselves? Some of the maybe initial questions and trying to understand like what is it that the customer is looking for, what are their current like pain points or problems that they're trying to solve for, and evaluate, is this a quote that makes sense? Is this one of our type of a customer? And again, there's a lot that goes into that. But from there, we're doing the estimating part where we're putting together, all the numbers into PaintScout. We're using the measuring tools and all that kind of fun stuff. And then we're gonna get back together with the customer and we're gonna go over the price. We always want to give price on the spot. I would say we do that about 99% of the time. And we go over, using the iPad, sit at the kitchen table, whatever that looks like, front porch, whatever. Go over that, ask for the sale, seek out those objections. If we aren't getting a decision on the spot, we're going to schedule a time for a follow-up call. I've also done some, times where we'll go back to the house afterwards, instead of a call to follow up, schedule a time I can stop by and talk in person. That can get impractical just depending on how busy you are and how far apart things might be. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's kind of, again, broad strokes, what, a in-home sales process type of a system might look like. Is that right? What else would you add or change to that?
I think that, in order to run a successful sales team, you need a sales process. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's anything I can add to it. It really comes down to how you want to treat it at your company. Ours is very similar to yours. I mean, we're both kind of using, a system based off of, Sandler sales system. And, we try to train on that system, but we have a formula to this. It's not random, show up, guess the price, stand in the person's front door, say, great shirt and leave. We want to facilitate a really positive experience for the customer. And so in having a process, that allows us also to reflect on the process.
Yes.
Work with our reps, right? If you don't have that process, this is a non-starter.
Yep.
You can't have, how do we evaluate something that's random? Mm-hmm. Right? Oh, you didn't make your sale? Couldn't tell you why. But in this particular conversation, because we have a process, we're going to now meet with the individual when they're not performing, and we're going to be able to talk about process.
The first thing that comes to mind when you bring that up is the ride-alongs. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of ride-alongs with our new reps as part of like their initial training. I would say something that I've been kind of guilty of in the past and recent past even is getting too busy and not doing enough ride-alongs with our somewhat experienced sales reps. Once they get up to speed, doing pretty well, maybe they're starting to struggle a little bit, and I probably need to do more ride-alongs and earlier. We do have a coaching sheet for ride-alongs, where it goes back to that sales process and it explains each step of the process in a very detailed, more broken down way than I just explained it. And there's specific things that I'm looking for. Are we asking these types of questions? How do we greet the homeowner when we first arrive? Mm-hmm. Things like that. And that I can evaluate them on. We basically just use a simple 1 to 5 or 0 to 5 scale. And then afterwards, so literally I'm on the ride along. I've got a clipboard with that document. I'm hanging out kind of in the background. Obviously I'm, introduced and part of some of the conversations, but I'm letting the rep really do their thing. And I'm focused on that piece of paper on my clipboard and just evaluating how are they doing. They got a 4 for this, they got a 5 for that, they got a 2 for this, writing down comments, great job with this, kind of forgot to do this.
Mustard on your shirt. What does that get on 5? 1 on 1, 2, 4 on 5 mustard on the shirt? What do you?
If it's a yellow shirt, we could probably go with a 4. Okay. That doesn't really fit our brand color, so we're probably gonna go with a 2.
Yeah, so they wore like a yellow like Daytona shirt or something.
Yeah. We're
And
not.
then, okay, yeah, so that says like negative too. So yeah, in addition to those, self-evaluation forms that we're doing, we are also we've done a secret shopper in the past, and so sometimes I think like when you're with somebody, Michael, like you've got, um, they now have an audience, and
Sure.
so they might not like behave the way they actually do.
Mm-hmm.
They're like more cognizant of it.
Stockholm.
Sometimes it actually affects the sales
Yep.
process of that job too, because the customer's like, great, I'm in the middle of someone being tested. And so the self-evaluation form is helpful, but we've done secret shopper
Mm-hmm.
experiments before where we will find a client who's willing to find a client or just a friend or somebody in our network who's willing to have a paint job estimate on their home and have a couple, our estimator come out or and a couple other, you know, sales reps or just that estimator and see whether they're following the process. So, what actually happened during the time, what questions were asked, what was the length of the meeting, you know, give us all the details, and then exchange, we'll send them out for dinner or something like that.
Mm.
But that's been really effective for us to see how our reps are acting when we're not there. And so, um, now we've had reps who have performed really poorly on these secret shoppers. We'll
Yeah.
have a few companies out and we finish last,
Mm.
and it's like, okay, well, this is not good. But now we have data to work off of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why were we unlikable? Why did we come off like we were arrogant? Why did we not ask about price? Like,
Mm.
why did you send the estimate 3 days after you said you would? Right? Like,
Sure.
these are bad things, but
But
in
they're
our
real.
cases,
Yeah.
they're real. It's real, and when you lose, you really get to see why and how
Yeah.
versus just guessing. So I think the next part of the process here is, once we've identified what's going on, so you have a process, you're looking at process, like, hey, how did you do? What's missing?
Yeah.
We can start to work on the person.
I want to jump back real quick. Have you heard
Yeah.
of this like AI tool called, I think it's pronounced Rilla Voice? It's
Mm.
Rilla. It's like essentially, I've never used it. So I'm just curious if you're familiar with it. But it's my understanding is that it's essentially, I think you're using your iPhone or whatever, and it's recording the sales appointment and then
Mhm.
using AI tools to like summarize and provide some like coaching and feedback. Have you heard about this? Used it? Any thoughts?
I've heard of it, but we've not put it into place. And I've always had questions about just, privacy law, that kind of thing with it. But what's your,
Yeah,
would you want to try this thing?
I want to
You
try
want to
it.
give it a
Yeah,
shot?
yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds.
give it a shot.
I mean, so first of all, if it's software or AI tools, I'm a pretty easy sale. Like I'm just so
Mhm.
curious.
Mhm.
Sign me up. Oh, what? Oh, yeah. What does it cost?
Right, right, right.
But I think it's a huge problem. I mean, I do think, I like the secret shopper idea. But having more like tools to help myself when I'm out selling or sales reps or whatever.
Mhm.
I don't know how I sound. Anybody listening to this probably, thinks not good. But it's like in a sales appointment, I have my thoughts as how I'm coming across, and I feel like I asked those questions, but to be able to go back and listen and even just to like self coach, let alone have somebody else coach me or using AI to do that, I think it would be, I would be pretty, think it would be pretty cool.
Well, maybe we make it a mission to try it out,
Yeah,
get back
I
to
think that'd be
everybody and
cool.
see how it actually works, because that could have some really huge impacts if it
Sure,
does. And I'd like to know more about, just privacy and how that
for
works with
sure.
letting clients know about that. So
Yeah,
let's check back
yeah.
in on that process. I mean, we live in this strange world where we have, representatives going out to homes, and we really have no clue what's
Sure,
going on. And that's probably like the most blind part of our business, is how does that actually look? So
sure. Yeah,
we can check on crews. You just can't check on sales process. It's easy. So
yeah.
going back to kind of our theme today, which is, when sales aren't going well as expected,
Mm-hmm,
we're into the people problem. So you have
mm-hmm,
processes and people. I've heard it said before. Systems run the business, people run the systems.
mm-hmm.
So we've now found an individual on our team that's not following systems. Um, I think I've heard it said before, when there's behavior that's an issue, either the person can't, they won't, or
Mhm.
they don't know how.
So say that again. Can't. What was it?
Can't, won't, and don't know how.
Can't, won't, don't. Yeah. I mean, I think it reminds me. I've not heard that, to be honest with you. So I want
Mm,
you to elaborate on that.
mhm,
I'll say, just to give a thought. It reminds me of like in EOS. There's a concept called GWC, which we would use to evaluate anybody in any role,
mm,
which stands for gets it, wants it, and has the capacity to do it. Do
mhm,
they get the job, understand
mhm,
it? Do they want it? And then capacity, right? Do they have the skills? Do they have the time? Do they have maybe the experience and knowledge that it's going to take? Um, and depending on, if somebody's not performing, which of those is it? Is it
mm,
which of the GWC is the actual problem? Is really going to determine whether or not this is something we can coach and fix, or whether or not we might just need to replace this person. But
mhm.
it sounds kind of similar to what you described, but I'd love for you to elaborate.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I think it comes down to, like you said, I mean, the desire to do it, the ability to do it, um, and the I guess so can't, won't, so desire, ability, and then
Don't
trainability,
know.
like what resources they need. Um, so yeah, when I dig into that, I think about to myself, okay, with the issue being low close rate,
Mm,
right?
okay.
Can't means maybe there's external factors. Um, you know, didn't get enough estimates. That's a hard one, right? I guess we talk more about dollars closed in that case. So dollars closed, did you get enough estimates?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we didn't really get enough estimates, so maybe they couldn't actually reach the target without the estimates needed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, won't it for me is they're being asked to do something and they just kind of refuse. So in the process, like, um, can they ask for the sale?
Yep. I was just gonna say that.
And they've just decided, I don't want to do that. It's not worth my
Mm.
time. And so that to me is really more of a removal. But like those two are kind of
Mm-hmm.
borderline. Like we need to talk about removal. Um, doesn't know how comes back to that process. So when you do the
Mm-hmm.
evaluation, it's like, oh, um, we were trying to look at,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, getting the right questions to the customer to understand their issue, and you just didn't understand that part of the process. So let's work on that.
Yeah.
So, I don't, is that similar to EOS? Kind of way you describe it.
Yeah, I would think it is. Yeah. I mean, so what I hear you saying, just to reiterate it, make sure I understand. Let's go with that, asking for the sale. So a new rep might not know that they're supposed to. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
they think, oh, I'm just gonna give you the quote, and then the customer says, give us a call in a week or two, and then I call them in a week or two. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there you go. Seems like a good way of doing it. What could go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then maybe we coach them and say, well, we're actually gonna ask them while we're here, you know, is this something you guys want to do? Give me some feedback on our price. What are we thinking here? Whatever, however you might do that. So yeah, so that's a training and a competency type of a thing. That goes back to the don't. They don't know how to do that, and it could also just mean like they need some word tracks on the right way to do that. Um, that's not just gonna, I don't know, be overly aggressive, but not overly passive either.
Mm-hmm.
If they can't, it might be more of a like personality issue. It might be not that they're like physically can't form the words, but it's just like in that moment, um, it's just not their personality. They're so averse to conflict. They are so like, people pleasing by their nature, that as soon as they get, any sort of hint of resistance from the client, they're going to back down and, you know, avoid that, asking for the sale part.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they're just so afraid of hearing no,
Mm-hmm.
which, is certainly a challenge in a sales role. Um, and then I think the other one is where they won't do it. It's more of a like conscious choice
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, I think that the can't and won't is like, is it a subconscious like issue, or is it like they're blatantly saying, I disagree. I'm actually just going to send the quotes, and people that want to book are going to book, and you're wrong. This is just, you should never ask for the sale.
Right.
And I have a feeling that person already went on their last appointment.
Right. Right.
for John's company.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I follow that. Yeah, I think it's very similar.
What's the next steps here? So, like, just so everybody's following, we figured out that we're evaluating the process of the data, so timelines, doing it frequent. We're looking. I mean, if you have a process, great. We're now evaluating our process internally or with our reps. If we're not getting the results we're looking for, though, we've got a framework now of why that might be the case with the person.
Mm-hmm.
How do we improve it?
So generally I'm going to get, whenever something's not working like I want it to, I want more frequent data. I'm going to be more involved, whatever it is. So I want more data, more quickly. I'm going to do more ride-alongs. I'm going to have more meetings and things like that. We will utilize a performance improvement plan. So this might be, for example, maybe a rep has missed their goals 2 months in a row. We're getting close to the point of, we're going to have to release you into the wild and let you go work somewhere else because this isn't the right fit. But before we do that, we want to be very clear. One of our rules is firing somebody should never be a surprise to that person. And so we want to make sure that we're giving a lot of coaching, a lot of feedback, a lot of opportunities for them to understand and make changes. Again, going back to what we just talked about, if they choose not to, then, that's okay. And they've made a choice to work somewhere else. So that performance improvement plan is typically like a 1-month process where I need to see very specific actions. Again, it's going to really depend on what the problem is. If they're just not working enough, like, okay, we need to work more. We need to do more activities. If they won't ask for sales or they haven't been, but they want to, then it's like, okay, well, we need that to happen, and probably going to do some check-ins. I've, not done like the secret shopper thing that you described before, but what I have done is I've called homeowners after a sales rep has been at their home and just asked them how it went. And, just like a couple basic things, like, did they give you the quote while they were there? Did they ask you if you wanted to work with us? Things like that. And it's amazing that even, without any prior like questions or coaching, homeowners will usually give me all the information I need to know kind of how the appointment went. Well, they showed up late and they didn't, I was really frustrated because it took way too long and didn't even give me a price or whatever. It's like, oh, got it. Okay. I have a really good idea what's going on now. So those are the kind of things. And that performance improvement plan is exceptionally detailed. This is kind of the problem. Here's what's lacking. Here's what, we've identified this as the problem. We've discussed this as the solution. I need to see exactly this by exactly this date. Otherwise, you will probably not be working here. And we're going to sit down. We're both going to sign that document. And, I'm going to provide them with every opportunity I can to help them be successful with it. But, unfortunately, my experience has been that it's typically a kind of a last-ditched effort that doesn't tend to, work, I guess. But,
it's so hard. I mean, I've yet to find a performance improvement plan where it's actually been a long-term solution.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, I agree with you. Don't let people go unless they know why and how to improve. But I've always wondered if it could be called something else. Like a performance improvement plan seems pretty serious. But maybe, and also as you say that, like I think about our own process and being like, maybe we do this with people who are actually good performers too. Like I've heard it said, like, we spend way too much time with our, people that are challenges on our team.
100%.
And not enough with the top performers. And I think about, our our reps currently, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
like the guys who are top performers get no attention. They continue to perform, but maybe there's a document you could actually create that was like just performance for next month.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the vision? What's the issue? So it doesn't feel like this big negative. It's actually something we do all the time.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
So what worked? If what's working for you is great, let's keep doing that. And if it's
Yeah.
not, well, we got to fix it.
I do think there's something to be said for like having that serious conversation though, so that hopefully you can get that behavior change.
Yeah.
Right. Again, it's like this isn't something that, hey, you missed the goal for the week, we're having a performance improvement plan. It's, we've been having a lot of coaching conversations and we've been missing goals and the behaviors have been off here for some amount of time. um, we need to be, I need to be a little more direct and a little more clear here that this is not acceptable.
Mhm. Do you think there's any variation of all of this if you're a sole proprietor or someone who's doing all the sales for your company?
Well, I mean, I think one thing is perhaps not everybody's good at sales.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just because you're a business owner doesn't mean that you should be doing the sales.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think too often business owners hold on to that for too long. It's funny. I had, just literally this morning, I had breakfast with a really good friend who owns a uh, business locally. It's not in the painting industry, but it's kind of, similar, home improvement kind of thing. And he, for a while, so he came from a sales background even before he had this business. He was a really good sales rep at a manufacturing company. Nothing, not related, but just great sales background, great networker. I would hire him in a heartbeat to come do sales for me. Um, and so he's generally done all the sales in his own company. And for a while, I've been encouraging him to hire a sales rep and get himself out of that seat because it is such a full role, that you really are spending so much time working in the business, even though it's in a sales spot. You're not doing the painting or whatever. It's, doing the sales is a very in the business kind of a role.
Mm-hmm.
And I had breakfast with him and he's like, yeah, I got this new sales rep. I hired him like 2 months ago. He's doing great. I don't know why I didn't listen to you and do this a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
I have so much more time now to like focus on the business type activities.
Mm-hmm.
And he can still go do some sales. It's just that the business doesn't rely on him for sales. And again,
Totally.
he's really good at it. And I think there's a lot of business owners that are okay at it
Mm-hmm.
that would be surprised that somebody else might be able to come in and do a lot better. Um, and I think, having some real conversations with themselves and perhaps just, maybe it is just hiring a coach or hiring somebody who can hold them accountable. I think that's one of the biggest challenges in running our own businesses is having somebody else that we're accountable to is a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think so. I mean, we have a lot of sales reps too that may to this as well. And I think in addition to what you're saying, like, sales is a skill. It's a very valuable skill. And, it's one that through this process, um, self-evaluation is so helpful because we're always wondering how to improve, how to get more sales. You know, sales, it can be an incredibly great career if you're selling lots of work. And so when you're
Mm-hmm.
not, you start to ask yourself questions, and go back through your process. This is what we coach our teams on is like, when things aren't going, you're not hitting your goals, internalize your process. Am I doing this well? What can you work on? What can you practice? Like, so often we're going on bids and we're trying to just perform, but this is a performance, right? Like, this is a bit of an act we're doing to facilitate a positive sales experience. So looking back and saying, what is my process? What are the things that I'm not doing
Mm-hmm.
that I should be doing? Where can I improve? What areas of improvement are there? I think is so valuable
Yeah.
because this is, when it starts from inside, it makes the conversation so much easier for everybody else to contribute
Mm-hmm.
versus what you talked about, which is the personality where it's like, I'm good. Thanks very much. It's all external.
Mm-hmm.
Start with I
Right.
need to do this, start with
Yeah.
the internal stuff. And so from that, if you're listening from that perspective, I mean, this all applies, but in terms of your own process. And I think in terms of the calls, what's interesting is I would love to know if you're a sole proprietor, if you could somehow get somebody else to call on your behalf to see how you did.
Mm.
right? To get that
Mhm.
feedback. Like we're
Sure.
talking about like
Coach. Yeah.
our sales team, but man, like when I first started, I would have loved to have known how I come off because
Hmm.
I looked like I was 12 years old. I had no idea what I was doing, and how I got any work is beyond me. But I would have loved to get feedback. So,
Yeah.
um, being open to feedback, getting feedback, this is
Yeah.
critical to success in sales.
Just the last quick thought on what you just talked about. I think
Mm-hmm.
for maybe a sole proprietor, one of the challenges they might have is not having a sales process,
Yeah.
right? Just like you might, or an estimating process or whatever that might be, because it's just like, I know what I'm doing. I've done it for a long time. I go out and, I talk to people and I sell painting jobs. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
hard. And it's like, perhaps, but when things are not going well, you don't have anything else to go back on. And so
Mm-hmm.
you do, it's very common then to externalize it, where the challenge or whatever that I would pose is create the sales process, document that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And now you'll have something that you can utilize when you are ready to make that first sales rep hire. But even if that's not what it's used for, even if you just use it to kind of self coach yourself and to, remember back to like, all right, wait, this is the standard. Let me go back to, am I following the standard?
Mm-hmm.
We do so many quotes and it's really easy to just kind of, get off course a little bit, and having that like documented process to go back to that we talked about before, I think is great. Not just if you have reps and a bigger business, but even for somebody who's, a sole proprietor, like you mentioned, or just doing all their own sales.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. Know
Cool.
your process, tweak your process,
Yeah. Be able to,
meet your
yeah, be able
goals.
to, yeah, break it down. I think that's the
Yeah.
big thing. Like if you're not hitting a goal, like break that down into the smallest piece that you can so you can focus in on where is the actual challenge and problem, and then start addressing that instead of getting caught up in, we didn't make, or, we didn't sell enough. We didn't hit our top line revenue. Like that is way too broad to try to fix. You need to be fixing stuff that's, a little bit more manageable.
Totally. Well, I think on that note, let's wrap it up.
I like it.
Talk to you next time.
Good stuff.
All
See
right.
ya.
Have a great day.